He's live.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. We are now joined by our chief guest, Mr. Salman Fazlur Rahman, MP, our advisor, Honorable Advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister for Private Sector, Private Industry and Investment, Government. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
We can now start our program. I will hand it over immediately to my colleague, Dr. Ahsan Mansoor, to make the opening remarks. Dr. Mansoor.
Okay. Let me first take this opportunity to welcome our chief guest, Mr. Salman Fazlur Rahman, MP, who is gracious enough to take his time, even though he's going through some temporary illness at this moment. But really see him as a friend, and he also takes us in that perspective, in that way, and we always get his support whenever we request his presence. He's always with us, and so we are very thankful, Salman bhai, for that.
Thank
We
you.
also with us. We also have with us our very beloved Minister of State for Planning, Dr. Samsul Alam, and he has been with PRI for the last 13 years, and we have been working on so many issues for such a long time that we consider he's one of us. And we look forward to his support and continued support in the coming years. So we also have with us the resident representative for Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal for IFC, Mr. Martin Hortman, and this is his first visit to PRI. So I welcome him here, and also is very recently posted in Dhaka. So from that perspective, also his welcome to Bangladesh.
Thank you, sir.
And we have a very distinguished panelists here. You all know them. Mr. Abdul Mannan Sikdar, Member Customs, is with us. Mr. Hafizu Rahman, Additional Secretary, Director General, WTO Cell, Ministry of Commerce. Mr. Habibullah Karim is the Vice President of FCCI and also MD and CEO of Techno Haven Company. Mr. Fazlul Haq, former President, Biki MEA, and Managing Director of Plummy Fashion Limited. We have with us, next to me is Mr. Asif Ibrahim, Director BGMEA and also Chairman Chittagong Stock Exchange. Mr. Mohammed Enamul Haq, here also, Managing Director and Country Head of Corporate, Commercial and International Banking, Standard Chartered Bank, representing the financial sector side. So we have that, and we have also joined by Ms. Salma Rezabek from Washington, DC. I presume is from the headquarters. She's from the IFC, and Dr. Duncan Overfield, Deputy Director and Team Leader, Prosperity and Economic Growth Team, FCPO. Thank you all for taking your time. And we all know that global economy is going through a very important supply shock. And trade facilitation is actually in part to facilitate what we call supply chain management part. It's a component, it's a way to improve supply chain management. So I see it from that broader perspective, that there is a global value chain, local value chain, and trade facilitation is aimed at improving that value chain to make it more efficient so that it serves the ultimate objective of lowering the cost of doing business and making things a bit cheaper than what it could be otherwise. So I look at it from the perspective that globalization has made things much cheaper across the globe. The reason Bangladesh and global economy as a whole had a very prosperous time in the last 20 years is partly attributable to the globalization process. And globalization has created a system of value chain that has now come under stress. It has come under stress for various reasons. One is the COVID, post-COVID thing, which is still continuing in China. Still yesterday, they locked down Shenzhen because of COVID. So this is going on. It's not done with us. Secondly, there is a supply shock from Russia and Ukraine war. We all know that also. But also there is a geopolitical tension-related supply, possible future supply disruptions or you can say redirection of supply chains. So these are important global shifts that are happening, but everything said and done, we must not forget that globalization and the development of the supply chain has been very, very positive for the world economic development. Reduction of poverty, the reduction of and the economic prosperity that the developing world, including China, India, Bangladesh, and others have seen, is largely attributable to trade-related supply chain development, which helped promoted investment across cross-border, and also reduce cost of doing business, and helped productivity gain, technology transfer, and all those things in a way attributable to this unique situation that the global economy has reached prior to the COVID pandemic. Now, against that background, we all know that Bangladesh has its own problems as well. We are part of the global community. We can gain significantly if we can improve our own supply chain management, particularly through this, what you call trade facilitation part. It is well known that Bangladesh has a lot of issues at the port of entry, be it land port or seaport. We have problems, and we have both internal domestic trade facilitation issues as well as foreign trade facilitation issues, and we have to address both, because without that, the rice price things is basically a largely domestic one. We cannot manage it because we have a problem there. We don't have the cold chain because we cannot manage those. That's why our price fluctuations are higher. So we need to address these issues in a holistic approach. And I'm happy that today's session, our lead speaker, Mashur Riaz, will be making a presentation which will indicate our gains we have made so far and the things which are yet to be done, but we hopefully will be done in the coming months and years towards that objective, which will really connect Bangladesh more efficiently, effectively with the global value chain, as well as develop an internal value chain for our domestic products to be marketed domestically in a much more efficient way, so that we can avoid the supply shocks and price fluctuations of the extent that we are experiencing. To the extent you can reduce it a little bit, it will be a great achievement. We hope that we have a very constructive discussion today, and I thank all for your kind participation, and we look forward to a very active discussion. Thank you. Dr. Zali Sattar will take it over from now.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan Mansoor, for a very informative and I guess stimulating. You have stimulated a lot of thoughts now. I think we will have to follow it up, and Dr. Masroor will have to take up that challenge. I have to, now I would like to invite Ms. Selma Resavek, who's Manager Creating Markets Advisory in the IFC, and she's joining us from Washington, D.C. Selma Resavek, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. First of all, sincere apologies for not being able to be with you in person. But as Martin has indicated at the beginning of the event, I will be relocating to Delhi in a few days. So I will be spending a lot more time in Bangladesh in person going forward. Thank you all for your time to be with us today, to esteemed panelists and partners and colleagues on behalf of Bangladesh Investment Climate Fund Program, or in short, the BICF. which is IFC's Programmatic Technical Assistance Program supported by FCDO, I would really like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to today's roundtable on improving trade facilitation for export competitiveness. So the Trade Competitiveness for Export Diversification project is a project that was implemented under the broader BICF program, which started back in 2017 and recently ended in June 2022. And during its tenure, the project has provided support to the National Board of Revenue and the Ministry of Commerce in addressing issues related to trade policy and trade facilitation. And as most of you, of course, know, one of the key challenges for facing Bangladesh to leverage on its growth performance and attaining the higher income status in line with its vision and strategy is, among others, to provide more jobs, which among other areas requires a significant investment increase in private investments and successful integration in global value chains. And according to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, trade is regarded as an engine for inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction. And with a $75 trillion global export market, Bangladesh has a lot to gain and leverage by entering new markets with new products to fulfill on its vision of advancing export-led growth and creating greater employment opportunities for its people. So specifically strengthening the trade competitiveness through both reduced time and cost of trading across border is one of key factors to attain export growth vision of Bangladesh. And as our experience shows, countries who have in place modern and easy to access border policies are in a better position to attract more and significant investment opportunities. And as part of our trade project that was implemented over the last couple of years, the implemented activities aimed at reducing both delays and administrative burdens for easier processing and quicker lead time and digitizing processes where appropriate and needed. And the project itself supported key reforms which laid out the foundation for a competitive trade environment in the country, just to name a few, ranging from the framework for the national tariff policy to modernization of bonded warehouse for non-RMG sectors, supporting the government to set up a first ever customs risk management commissionerate and approved policy and operational guidelines for national single window for trade. And furthermore, the project adopted innovative reform strategy addressing the building blocks of desired changes through collaboration with different stakeholders, both in the public and the private sector, laying out the ground for larger reform programs to follow. And it's important for both, of course, the government and the private sector to keep up the great momentum that has been created by these reforms and continue the journey of continued improvement. So we wanted to take a stock and look back what the project, what has worked in the project, what could be improved, and what messages can we share with policymakers and future reform champions based on our experience in implementing this project. So in that light, our colleagues from the Policy Research Institute and Policy Exchange of Bangladesh have reviewed jointly the project and put forward recommendations that will be presented today during the roundtable, and hope you will find it useful and it will provide a good food for thought and basis for a fruitful discussion. In closing, I would like to thank our client counterparts for their excellent partnership in implementing the project, our FCDO colleagues for their continued support, and our colleagues in PRI and Policy Exchange of Bangladesh for their support in the assessment of the project. Now over to, I trust, Dr. Zaidi Sattar, the chairman of the Policy Research Institute, for his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Selma Rasavak, for your introductory thoughts and giving us an idea of the support that IFC has made to this particular aspect of trade facilitation. And as we know, the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement is now operative. Bangladesh has ratified this agreement. So this is now operational, and a lot of work has already been done thanks to the support from IFC, and more work is going to be done. And the challenges will be talked about by our colleague, our keynote presenter today, Dr. Masroor. It is probably my turn to, say in about 5 minutes, since I'm, in my specialization, a trade economist, so I just couldn't resist the opportunity to talk about trade and development and how they are linked. Our chief guest today is an intensive practitioner of trade, as I would say. Trade and business, they are just two integrated things. So thank you. I hope what I say today may be of some relevance to the policies that he makes and the business that he undertakes. So thank you. The one message I want to, it's a sort of history, which is to say that the idea of gains from international trade actually originated and was articulated by European classical economists like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and John Stuart Mill. But the actual, the using trade as an instrument of development, that idea, that innovation actually came from Asia, from what we know as the East Asian tiger economies in the 1960s and 70s, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong also. So World Bank called the experience East Asian miracle, and export-led development then became a development paradigm, and it was used by multilateral agencies also. So the East Asian economies showed the world how export-led and trade-led growth could turn poor economies into high-income developed economies in about 50 years' time. And that is what Bangladesh is probably engaged in right now. Now, around the world, trade economists also saw how trade openness and removal of trade restrictions could augment international trade, could raise global income. In the 70 years since 1945 conference, the Bretton Woods Conference, which set up the post-World War trading system, trade became an effective engine of growth. Expansion of global trade led to the rise in global incomes, driving post-war economic prosperity for most nations around the world. In Bangladesh, after losing about 2 decades due to lack of direction in trade policy, in the 1990s, Bangladesh chose to pursue development policy of export-oriented trade by switching from an overwhelmingly inward-looking import-substituting trade policy to an outward-looking export-oriented trade policy by liberalizing trade, rationalizing and reducing tariffs and quantitative restrictions, moving from fixed to flexible exchange rate, adopting partial convertibility of current account, together with supporting market-oriented reforms like deregulation of investment and like. Because of the switch to trade openness, Bangladesh was described as a globalizer among developing countries. And globalizing developing economies were growing faster than the non-globalizing developing economies. That was the research finding. In the context of Bangladesh, it is the trade volume, export plus import of goods and services, that has been rising tremendously. It was only $15 billion in 2001. It has now crossed $130 billion, more than 9 times the trade volume in the beginning of the 21st century. Bangladesh is now well integrated with the world economy, both through goods and services trade. While leading development experts now describe Bangladesh as a successful story of development, taking note of progress in poverty reduction, human and social development, if there is one predominant factor that can be called the driving force behind Bangladesh's rapid growth with internal and external macroeconomic stability, it is Bangladesh's enhanced integration with the global marketplace through international trade. Make no mistake, Bangladesh's global integration is not just limited to trade in goods. A big chunk of our trade lies in the export of factor services, that is, services of our migrant workers, under the auspices of WTO General Agreement on Trade in Services, GATS. That brings in copious amounts of remittance income and foreign exchange to finance our bulging import bill. Trade facilitation improvement, therefore, must cover not only A, goods trade, but also B, rising trade in factor services,
Rahman MP. We also have with us the Honorable State Minister for Planning, Dr. Shamsul Alam, distinguished panelists, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, a very good morning and Assalamu alaikum. It is indeed a great privilege to be able to get the opportunity to present this keynote on a very timely and important topic for Bangladesh's development. As Bangladesh aspires to become a high-income country by 2041, as enshrined in its Vision 2041, and in the path aspires to become a middle-income country by 2031, as Dr. Sattar mentioned, export-led growth and trade under the auspices of overall trade is going to be a critical development driver. And trade facilitation will continue to remain an important determinant of the efficiency of that development driver. And hence, today's presentation and session on the trade facilitation in Bangladesh and its progress, the lessons emerging from that, and the policy priorities going forward. This presentation is based on an analytical work that was completed end of last year by PRI, where I also had the opportunity to lead a certain part of the elements. And that looked at the trade facilitation agenda of Bangladesh as a determinant to the export competitiveness, which will play an, as I say, important role in the growth trajectory of Bangladesh in the coming years and the decades. And the government initiatives supported by different development partners, as well as government's own initiatives, have been assessed, progress measured, lessons identified, and policy priorities have been put together, as Selma from IFC said, in order for the policymakers as well as for the private sector to understand the critical insights that are coming from this progress and the lessons and what it implies for the policy agenda in the coming days. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to cover about 5 different agendas as part of this keynote presentation. We will talk about the competitiveness imperative, particularly the trade competitiveness imperative for Bangladesh and the role trade facilitation plays in that narrative. We will look into, as I said, the key trade facilitations strategy and the initiative undertaken by the government of Bangladesh and the progress they have secured and the achievements and lessons. But very interestingly, this is perhaps, as far as I am aware, is the first effort which also looked at the relationship between trade facilitation, the overall quality of the environment in terms of trade, and its impact on investment, both domestic and FDI, as well as jobs. And then finally, policy priorities. Now, as Dr. Mansoor mentioned in his introductory remarks, which was echoed by also Dr. Sattar in his remarks, that globalization and trade both have turned out to be prosperous, a very virtuous kind of nexus for the world. Of course, we have seen some exceptions between 2016 and 2020 due to certain narrative changing in some very powerful capitals of the world. But I think there was never any doubt among the majority of the community around the world that trade is very virtuous. Trade leads to many gains. We all know about it, but there are several gains that trade leads to, which are highly relevant to what Bangladesh needs in its path to upper middle income and high income country for its development aspiration. Trade leads to productivity. A study of 138 countries have demonstrated just a 1% openness in the trade environment leads to 1.23% increase in productivity. And that is something, productivity-led competitiveness is something that Bangladesh will have to embrace. The competitiveness based on labor cost differential has delivered many gains for Bangladesh in the past, but going forward, increasingly, Bangladesh will have to depend on productivity-based competitiveness, and that's something trade helps. Trade also leads to innovation and technology and technical capacity by introducing quality products, services, and competition. Trade exposes the private sector as well as the community or stakeholders involved in trade to better ideas, innovative ideas, and innovative practices. If we look at some of the international examples, once the international trade, regional trade accession enable Argentina market access to huge market of Brazil, the Argentine firms increase their investments in technology and technology-led quality and competitiveness and productivity improvement by as high as 30%. And this is going to be important for Bangladesh, as Bangladesh will have to diversify both its product as well as market, both for the domestic as well as for the international markets. Trade also leads to improvement in institutional capacity and human capital. Institutional capacity is something that Bangladesh, again, just like productivity, cannot avoid but embrace in order to drive its next level of its journey in the next level of growth phase or growth trajectory. If we look at Vietnam, a great success story in the export-led growth model, the Vietnamese provinces which declined, which saw the highest decline in poverty, and as a result, reduction in maternal challenges, child mortality, as well as enrollment in education and skills, were also the provinces which saw the biggest benefits out of its trade with the United States. So all very relevant to the critical growth drivers that await Bangladesh in its journey to upper middle income and high income country journey. Now, trade facilitation, as again, Dr. Sattar and Dr. Mansoor outlined very clearly, is an important, very important component of this overall trade environment leading to enhanced trade competitiveness. But what is this trade facilitation? How do we decipher that? Simply put, trade facilitation refers to the measures which reduce complexities, times, and cost, and thereby reduce barriers to trade beyond very important traditional policies such as tariff rationalization as well as international market access. They can include at the border measures such as quality and adequacy of port infrastructure, port services in efficiency, customs and other regulatory clearances that are required for overall border clearance, standards in terms of quality, environmental and social increasingly becoming important part of standards these days, as behind the border, and factor and product market regulation that affect the manufacturing, the production cluster, and the delivery of the products and services that are meant for international trade. If we, what trade facilitation measures do, they reduce operational complexities as well as, very important, uncertainties, which is really the biggest pain private sector has, more than cost and time, the uncertainty. Study has shown that, transaction cost in a weak trade facilitation or inefficient trade facilitation environment, transaction cost for each shipment can go up by at least as little as 2%, but as high as 24%. But if you also look at the positive impact trade facilitation environment, a good one, can render, the global economy, according to WTO, can be $9 trillion larger by 2030 if what Dr. Sattar alluded to, the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, the TFA, is fully implemented. Now, riding on this sort of, it's not, can you change the slide? It's not working. There you go. Thank you. So riding on these global and conceptual advantages that we see and the criticality, one great example of or success story that we see, as I said earlier, is in the Vietnam's export-led growth success over the last 2 decades. Vietnam, in just 2 decades, increased their exports from $14 billion in 2000 to $265 billion just before COVID in 2019. Some of the earlier version the panelists received, there was a typo. The 2000 came out as 2020, but it is 14 billion. It's in 2000. So it's almost a close to 20-fold increase in their exports in just 19 years. But at the same time, Vietnam also quadrupled the number of products they export to the world. And I want to pick up an example of a particular sector, agribusiness, which is also important. And our honorable advisor, private industry, has been advocating its potential as a great source of export, growth, but also FDI destination. Vietnam's agribusiness export increased 8 times just in 10 years. And in 2019, they exported more agribusiness than total of Bangladesh's export, $40 billion in 2019. And it is on course to become $70 billion by 2024. Now, what made it possible? Of course, we know about Doi Moi. Doi Moi is the Vietnam's comprehensive reform program, which means renovation, which came in 1986. It was targeted at economic policy reform, but with the outcome sought in trade and investment. And big part of that was trade facilitation. They simplified customs procedure. They simplified border clearance related policies and regulations. They significantly improved their logistics infrastructure, transport, storage, ports, integration between different elements of logistics. And they, most importantly, they allowed both local, but as well as FDI into logistics, and something Bangladesh critically needs and hasn't been able to really take advantage of due to several policy and regulatory barriers. And as a result, Vietnam's position in the logistics performance index is globally 39, up from 53 in 2007 to 39 in 2018. It is above India, it is above Malaysia, it is above Indonesia, Sri Lanka, all its competitor countries in Asia who could potentially become its competitors in taking away some of its export strength. And that logistics strength is actually putting Vietnam ahead of time. And that came as a result of trade facilitation policies and the reforms. Now, Bangladesh, as I mentioned, the trade competitiveness is going to be extremely critical for achieving its development aspiration. But let me break down some of these important development aspiration. What are these? The economic and export diversification, both domestic and certainly export market, is going to be critical. Bangladesh had RMG. We have Asif Ibrahim from the RMG community, a big RMG exporter himself. It was 78% 10, 12 years ago of total export. In 2020, it is 82, 83%. So the concentration has gone up. If we look at the share of other potential sectors such as agribusiness, ICT, they are far smaller than what it can be, what Bangladesh's strength and potential really indicate to. Bangladesh also has to upgrade along the value chain of its existing as well as the upcoming sectors. I mean, it is in the low skill, low technology category at the moment for most of its export. It will have to go up to middle skill, mix of production technology to ultimately highly skilled technology-based delivery of its productions and products and services. Managing risks that are upcoming in international markets, because exports of goods and services, it's all about international markets, demand, supply, and managing the risk. One risk we are going to sort of have to face very soon, based on one of our great achievements, post LDC graduation, we are going to see tariffs imposed in some of our very important markets. European Union, where more than 60% of our exports go, is going to impose, as of now, with the loss of international support measures such as GSP, a 9.5% duty, which is currently zero. And we know in international markets, a 1 to 2% change in price or cost can actually take out the competitiveness. And this is coming at a time when Vietnam is going to operationalize its free trade agreement with the European Union, which will eventually render it 0% duty, while Bangladesh has the risk. But this risk, in addition to other trade policy and negotiation measures, can also be addressed if you can raise your competitiveness and minimize your cost and inefficiency. And finally, more and better jobs. 2 million jobs will have to be created in foreseeable future for Bangladesh to go to the next level of development. And that's where I think we see a big number of big unemployment among females, rising unemployment among educated youths. So that all of those require private investment to go up. A lot of that will be driven by export. And what we need eventually is the trade competitiveness to enable exports to come to the level which can absorb that jobs and investment that Bangladesh requires. Did we miss a slide? Hasnat, can you go back to the previous slide? This remote is somehow not working. Maybe it's stuck over there. I think there is a slide before this.
The audience is mentioned in the slides are not moving on the live. So
Yes.
there are still seeing some of the questions.
Also, the audience has problem with the slides.
Yeah.
So we request the patience of the virtual connector and our respected guest. They're sorting out the issue with the slide. It's just a technical issue. What was it like?
Can you try changing the slides?
Yeah, it's working now. I hope our guests connected to the Zoom can also see the slides changing now. No? So the message is, I think the guests are not still seeing this. But let me go on in the interest of the time. So while all these conceptual global best practice, the development priority of Bangladesh's own context indicate to the huge criticality of trade facilitation being an important driver of what Bangladesh requires going forward, the current state of trade facilitation, when looked at, analyzed carefully, indicate that there is significant improvement requirement in order for that trade facilitation environment to make Bangladesh more competitive and full alignment with the WTO. Some of the challenges that we see, there is longer clearance time and cost compared to some of the South Asian and East Asian competitors. If you look at the trading across border, which used to be part of the now defined the doing business program ranking of the World Bank, and if you break it apart, the time to export border and documentary compliance for Bangladesh is 315 hours. For Vietnam is less than 1/3 or about 1/3, 105 hours. For India, as a result of its excellent doing business reform program, it's 64 hours. And when we look at the cost, Vietnam is about 30% cheaper in terms of cost of export, $633 per consignment for Bangladesh. Vietnam is $429, and India, again, is $270. The coordination is a massive challenge, the policy and regulatory service delivery in the trade facilitation agenda. As many as 39 government agencies are involved. We only hear about or think of customs when it comes to, and ports. But the truth is, there are 39 ministries and agencies involved in issuing border clearance and managing the policies and regulations related to trade facilitation. And coordination is weak also because there is very little digitization that has happened, and there is very little cross-sharing of data and insights among these agencies as a lack of, as interoperability mechanisms lack. Logistics, I think Dr. Mansoor mentioned it. I think Dr. Sattar also mentioned it. As I mentioned, Bangladesh falls far behind in terms of its logistics quality and efficiency. The high logistics cost in Bangladesh can be seen in the numbers between 4.5% to 45% of the 49% of the total sales value can be stuck in the logistics cost. The average is extremely high compared to our competitors. The Dhaka-Chittagong highway, if the speed, the current speed, you may be surprised, for freight transportation is only 19 kilometers per hour per average. If you can just make it 40 kilometers per hour, it's a speed limit of internal township roads in many countries. Bangladesh's exports can go up between 7 to 8%. And if you can reduce the domestic integrated logistics costs, supporting both, as you said, Dr. Mansoor, domestic economy, but also export economy, just by 17%, this is according to a World Bank report, exports will increase by 7.4%. So with that trade facilitation level, I think Bangladesh will have to engage into significant improvement effort to take Bangladesh to that. But there is good news as well, as I mentioned. It's stuck again. Let me continue. There is good news as well. Now, recognizing the importance of Bangladesh's trade facilitation issue, I think what government has rolled out significant trade facilitation improvement measures since 2015-16. ADB, USAID, but very importantly, the World Bank Group, both IFC and the IBRD, with the support of the FCDO, have been providing some very important support in trade facilitation improvement. ADB, as I understand, and we have seen, provided support in legislation, the new Customs Act formulation together with the IFC project. They have helped integration of land ports and the customs stations, USAID in notification process, improving the laboratories in the for the standards compliance and so on. But majority of the initiatives that came in the last 5 years were part of the World Bank Group, IFC and IBRD support to the National Board of Revenue and Ministry of Commerce. Those included bonded warehouse reform program, and, formulation of Customs Act and its implementation, risk management principles. If you go to the next slide, I will need 5 more minutes, I think. But yeah, huh? Okay. So, risk management principles. So implementation of something, institutional reform measure called TRS, Time Release Study, which is a global World Customs Organization and WTO-led or endorsed instrument for continuous customs and trade facilitation reform, and rollout and implementation of WTO Tfa support. The Tfa has 3 categories, A, B, C. C is the category where the countries have to bring in reforms and improvements in policies and regulations. Back in 2019, I think, Nusrat, you were leading the work. There were 36 items where Bangladesh really needed to improve in terms of policy and regulatory areas. I hope some further improvements have happened, but COVID has certainly slowed it down. If we can go to next slide. As a result of some of these improvements supported by the IFC and the World Bank program, particularly the IFC Trace program, several outcomes came. There is a new, in terms of vision and policy document, there is a customs modernization strategic action plan. New Customs Act has been drafted, which went to Parliament, is now awaiting parliamentary approval. But it also brought in risk management principle, and risk management directorate was created. And 208 regulatory services related to trade facilitation were brought in under a new legislative draft for national single window, which itself is an excellent initiative currently under implementation process. But there is also authorized economic operator. If I understand correctly, our honorable advisors, one of the great business venture he set up, Beximco Pharma, is one of the first firms which got the approval to be an authorized economic or trusted trader operator. But there is also advanced ruling, electronic mechanisms, identification and payments and governance, and several other outcomes that came as a result of this IFC program. Now, opportunity lessons, there are several lessons coming up based on 8 criteria that we applied to understand the reform quality, implementation process, and effectiveness. They include understanding the political economy, robust design, awareness and ownership, ensuring efficacy and relevance, procedural, which is business process re-engineering and ICT or technology application, capacity strengthening, and public-private interface. So you see a number of lessons coming on. I'm rushing because of lack of time, but identifying and building sound policy relationship, entry points, as well as those who are set to gain and lose from the policy reforms. It is extremely important everywhere, but it is more important in Bangladesh. And understanding not only the sectoral economy, in this case, the trade and the NBR and Ministry of Commerce, but also the broader political economy is extremely important for the success of the reforms that are being rolled out, as well as will be taken going forward. And you will see in your handouts a number of other lessons. Bangladesh, we have deployed an empirical model to see whether trade facilitation in Bangladesh between 2008 and 2020 had a positive impact on investment and job. And we have seen that using the Trade Freedom Index under the Economic Freedom Index of Heritage Foundation, it has been proven that the improvements in trade facilitation and trade environment has led to positive effect on both domestic investment and private investment, as well as jobs. And we have specific numbers to denote that. And a small-scale rapid survey of direct beneficiaries have corroborated these empirical findings. So there are a number of recommendations which you will see, but I'm not going to bore you through that. But the key messages that TF, it is well proven that trade facilitation will be the most important driver of trade efficiency in Bangladesh, and as a result, for the export-led growth agenda for Bangladesh. And that trade facilitation agenda can also deliver 2 of the most important development drivers for Bangladesh: jobs and investment, private domestic and foreign. However, how much Bangladesh can take advantage of that? As of now, Bangladesh is behind in taking full advantage of this virtuous nexus. It will ultimately depend on how resolute and strategic the government is in terms of designing a trade facilitation holistic reform agenda, and how much interaction and contribution the private sector has, and the technical support of the development partners. So with that, let me stop it here and hand it over to Dr. Sattar. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Dr. Masroor, for a remarkable, very, very comprehensive presentation on this very critical subject, trade facilitation. Trade facilitation, if I understand you, is not just limited to export, facilitating export, but also facilitating import, because export and imports make up trade. But at the same time, it also facilitates supply chain management within the economy. So it's very multi-sectoral approach, this trade facilitation issue. It addresses not only at the border changes, but also behind the border changes. It requires measures that take care of at the border issues as well as behind the border issues. That's a very important thing. And you pointed out Vietnam as a real star, that other economies, particularly in South Asia, and particularly Bangladesh, should be looking forward to. What is there to learn from what Vietnam did? Vietnam is now an export powerhouse. How did they do it? So if Vietnam can do it, Bangladesh can do it. That's our understanding. With that, we now move on to our distinguished panelists. We've had some, time overrun, but it happens. So our first distinguished panelist is Dr. A. Mannan Sikdar, member of Customs Audit, Modernization and International Trade of the National Board of Revenue. Dr. Mannan Sikdar, apne kindly join.
Yes, I'm audible. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Thank you.
Respected chief guest and other honorable guests and audience, thank you for giving me the floor. The presentation, the keynote presentation was excellent. I would like to thank Mr. Dr. M. Masroor Riaz for a nice presentation. And we have understood that a good presentation, a good report has been made. And actually, we want to facilitate our trade. And for this, NBR is a very important stakeholder. And the discussion will give us more information and light to do more works on modernization and facilitate the trade. Here, the presenter has mentioned that for TFA, we have so many things to do. Already, we have done many things as we have introduced e-payment, penal provision, advance ruling, appeal procedure, PAP, risk management, and PCA, AEO. You know, we have already given permission to do three pharmaceutical industry, and we are going to allow more industry to take facility in AU sector. And in transit, we have already trials to transit, and most probably today another transit is going to be held, Chattogram to Shaula and Chattogram to Bibir Bazar. And you have mentioned that the expansion of bonded warehouse facility to non-RMG exporting sectors. Already it is in place, and our bond commissioners are providing bond license to non-RMG exporting sectors also. There are some linkage in industry, and there are some footwear and other industries who can take the facilities of bond. And Customs Act implementation already it has been done. The presenter already said, and our other respected Jaidi Sattar and other speaker has mentioned that already we have prepared a Customs Act under the best practices of international best practices. It is in the Law Ministry for vetting. I think it will be published very soon. Another issue, policy and operational strategies for national single window for trade. You know, we have MOU with 39 stakeholders. Already, we had several meetings with them, and the project is running very well. And already for hard component and sub-component, we have the tender, and it is in evaluation process. You know, 82% of total expenditure is related to hard component and sub-component. So within 2023, we will see the good result of national single window. And if we are able to do that, then trade will be facilitated. Importer and exporter will be able to submit online certification and everything. When bill of entry will be done, the importer will know that what certificate will be needed. Then he will apply online, and the stakeholder will issue certificate. And another risk-based customs control for reduced inspection, we have already NSW I have mentioned, and SIGOTA world system. There is a scope to monitor and to create a risk management system. Already we are doing on SIGOTA world system, and another risk management commissioner has been created, and it will work. The commissioner will start their function very soon, and if it is, then risk-based customs control will be enhanced. And implementation TRS-based reforms, already we have started 3 custom house Dhaka, custom house Chattogram, and Benapol custom house. Already the TRS report has been accepted by WCO, and we are going to disseminate the report on 5th September. It will be a very good report that is accepted by WCO, that we have done TRS, and it will create the opportunity to address our short lackings, and why are we taking more times. We will address the issues, and we will solve the issues very soon. And we think this TRS system will be done after 6 months or 1 year. We will do it, hopefully. And we have so many projects in our hand. World Bank project, Bangladesh Regional Connectivity Project, infrastructure development of Custom House Chittagong and Customs Academy Chittagong, and another ADB project, SDP Sector Development Project, that is infrastructure development of 9 LCs and others, and USAID Feed the Future customs capacity building support we are getting, and USDA Trade Facilitation Project, risk management of agro-based products. Then the risk management system will be created in for agro-based product. So there are so many, and another project is our bond management project, and bond management project is running very well, and all these projects will create the trade facilitation. I think NBR is running with on the good track, and all is if we get all supports from the other stakeholders, then NBR will be a digital NBR, and trade will be facilitated. Thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Mannan Sikdar, member NBR, member customs NBR. Thank you. You've given us information on several activities that NBR is engaged in and have completed. I'm sure our honorable chief guest and including myself, we are very much in favor of the idea of giving bonded system to all non-garment exporters, just like you provide to the ready-made garments sector. That is an ideal way of moving towards export diversification. There are other things as well. And we also informed about the TRS system, that the time release study, that should be very useful for all who are involved in seeing greater here trade taking place, exports as well as imports taking place in the country. We are also looking forward to the national single window becoming operational as soon as possible. So thank you for giving us these information on progress being made by NBR. Our next distinguished Our next distinguished panelist is Mr. Mohammed Hafizu Rahman, Additional Secretary and Director General of the WTO cell in the Ministry of Commerce. He's our, interlocutor, the World Trade Organization, and particularly, he will tell us about the trade facilitation agreement that Bangladesh has ratified and how we are moving forward. Mr. Hafizu Rahman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Respected moderator, honorable chief guest and special guests, distinguished participant. Assalamu alaikum. I'll briefly brief on the trade facilitation agreement and what we are
can you please unmute your...
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Respected moderator, honorable chief guest, honorable special guest, distinguished panelist, and participant. Assalamu alaikum. Very good afternoon to all of you. I'll briefly discuss, I'll brief on the trade facilitation agreement and the activities done in the Ministry of Commerce, what we are doing. Firstly, I'd like to thank our Dr. Mashrus Riaz for his kind and nice presentation about the implementation progress of trade facilitation activities in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a signatory of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. And by this time, we have notified 54 measures in the WTO under the Trade Facilitation Agreement. Recently, last 22nd August, we have notified 15 measures, the definitive dates of 15 measures under category C. So some measures in category B are still to be implemented, by 2024 and some by 2026. But the category C measures, 15 measures that we have notified, those will be implemented earliest by 2024 and by 2030. Some measures we have notified, those we have not yet found any development partners, and some have found that it is complex and difficult to integrate all the agencies. Therefore, we have kept some longer time, and so that all the agencies can come on board. We have one committee that is called the National Trade Facilitation Committee, headed by Honorable Commerce Ministers. And in that committee, 41 different agencies participate as a member of that committee, and this committee sits twice a year. Next 14 September, this committee will sit for its 6th meeting. Under that committee, we have 8 working group subcommittee on different issues. Suppose we have working group on national single window, we have working group on agriculture trade, working group on land port infrastructure, this kind of 8 working groups. These working groups are headed by the representative from respective organization or agency. And this NTFC specially monitor the implementation progress of the trade facilitation agreements and get updates from these working groups and give recommendation what in future we'll have to do. In category C notification, what we found from different studies made by the World Bank, and also we had another study from USDA, they are also working with us. We found that in some agencies, for some measures like test procedures, there are some problems that they don't have regulatory or legal options for testing procedures, especially testing, further testing. If someone claims that he's not satisfied with that test, there's the one appeal for test. That means no secondary testing provision is allowed with many regulations of our different agencies. Another problems we are facing with risk management issues. We have found around 29 agencies are involved with risk management issues at a different level. The customs is working on it, but customs already, they have prepared an risk management commissionerate, but in other agencies, relevant agencies like Agriculture Extension, DOF, DLO, Atomic Energy Commission, and other agencies, they must have that procedure so that they can expedite the issue to facilitate faster clearance at the customs point. We are working with individual agencies. We are sitting with the officials of the individual agencies and pursuing them, motivating them that they should go ahead with risk management procedures. They are positive, we found, but some legal changes are necessary because how to implement this risk management issue, they need to change the existing laws in BSTI and some other agencies also. We are hopeful that the single window that we have given a longer time, but we expect that with the support from the World Bank that is being implemented in the NBR, it will be completed very soon. And with this single window, a lot of other agencies will be integrated and this trade facilitation procedures will be faster. We have issues with transits. Still, we don't have any development partner because transit have a lot of issues like this regulatory changes, infrastructure development, these issues. We have not yet found any development partner for these issues. Therefore, we have kept it definitive date to be completed by 2030. But we are not sure that by this time we can implement all these issues of transit. We are hopeful. We have informed the WTO and the Tfa facilities. Then we sought some fund and guidance in these areas. But other areas, we believe that it will be implemented. Many areas have been set up dates by 2026, targeting the time of the graduation. We know that after graduation, our export will face additional tariffs and also will not be able to provide export subsidies to our exportable products. But we believe that we can substitute that problem of tariffs and subsidies by facilitating trade, reducing the cost to the traders. These are the progress that we are I have put forward to you, and the committee, National Trade Facilitation Committee, is overseeing everything. So we have trying to coordinate all the agencies so that agencies, if they face any trouble, if they face any support from the development partner, we try to communicate with the development partner so that they can expedite their implementation of these measures. This is from my part. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Hafizu Rahman, Director General of the WTO cell. You are heading Bangladesh's, as the interlocutor with the World Trade Organization. You are a very critically important person when it comes to Bangladesh trade with the world market. Thank you so much. And we take it from you that Bangladesh, after ratification, is moving forward with many trade facilitation measures, and you've informed notified other member countries, notified WTO, I guess. And it's also good to know that there is a National Trade Facilitation Committee, NTFC. But we would hope that instead of meeting just 2 times a year, it should meet many more. I think the number of meetings should be increased, and I think that would be more helpful. Thank you, sir. May I now invite our next distinguished panelist, but I need to mention that in the interest of time, We would like to keep each intervention to 10 minutes, if you please. And please, you don't need the introduction. You can just go on to make your points. And our next distinguished guest is Mr. Habibullah Karim, Vice President of the Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce and Industries. And he's also the MD and CEO of a very well-known ICT firm, Technohaven Company Limited, that has been in operation for more than 30 years now. And therefore, he should be able to tell us what is digitization and electronic commerce really help facilitate, how it is facilitating trade, what are the challenges. Thank you. Mr. Habibullah Karim, the floor is yours.
That is not working. Just speak on that microphone in this room.
My voice will be picked up by that microphone.
Oh, there is one there.
Thank you, Dr.
10 minutes, sir.
Yes, I'll take less than. I will just. Dr. Zaidi Sattar, Chairman of PRI, thank you for giving me the floor, and it's my pleasure to be able to join this important meeting on trade facilitation amongst so many august personalities, including our pleasure to be Minister of Trade and Investment, Mr. Rahman. In the keynote presentation, Dr. Masroor Riaz has gone through all the ramifications of trade facilitation and how it can impact our growth, overall socio-economic development. So, your something that policymakers will take into account. But what I want to draw your attention to are the bullet points when it comes to trade facilitation and what it means for the industry. In Bangladesh today, government revenue to GDP ratio is below 10%. You know that. Government expenditure to GDP ratio is only around 17%. So what that tells us that 83% of the economy is in the private sector. So when we talk about economic growth, social growth for the country, that cannot happen without the private sector being able to play its due role. And that is why I think trade facilitation is so important. So this is something as a bullet point we must keep in our mind. We know that trade facilitation refers to simplification, harmonization, and automation of international trade procedures. The chair has already mentioned, because of my involvement in the IT industry. Of course, we have been talking about automation of not only trade facilitation measures, but also all government machinery to make it easier for citizens, make it easier for businesses to carry out their work. Now, we all know about, again, Dr. Masroor Riaz and earlier speakers have talked about what are the benefits of trade facilitation. So this is a no-brainer for us all. But what is very frustrating is that having known all this, and this is not something that we have just learned today, we have known about this for the last 30 years. Having known all that, the progress has been painfully slow. Progress has been painfully slow, and that's where I believe the Honorable Trade and Investment Advisor to the Prime Minister, since he's from the industry, we look forward to his proactive steps in making these faster, making these reforms faster, so that the cost of doing business and overall operational frictions in carrying out business can be lower and significantly lower. So when we talk about trade facilitation, when we talk about automation,
The key word is actually not automation. The key word is not even the facilitation. The key word is taking away the friction. So, and the only way we can take away that friction is if we put the private sector policymakers together with the public sector policymakers and formulating the policies and implementing those policies. So in that respect, another initiative that I'd like to see happen is, the DGWTO cell has talked about various committees being formed that is looking after all these trade facilitation measures. And I'm sure there are probably representation from the private sector in those committees, if I'm not mistaken. What I would like to see is the private sector representatives are given a leadership role. It's not just being a member of it. Only then we would see these changes actually happen. So this is something I would like to see happen. And because of paucity of time, what I'm going to end with are some thoughts and recommendations from the trade and industry side. Number one recommendation is, trade is absolutely essential for our growth. Trade is the engine of the economy. But when we look at the Ministry of Commerce, we see that the WTO cell still today is headed by an officer of the rank of an additional secretary. And that too was only probably a couple of years back. Before then, it was an officer of the rank of a joint secretary. We would like to see the WTO cell headed by a full secretary rank officer. So that would, give the message that we are giving due importance to WTO affairs. In many countries, even in like Australia, even the whole foreign affairs is subservient to the economic interests of the government. So it is under the economic ministry. So, but here we see that the foreign ministry has its own agenda, and oftentimes we have to fight with them to get them to help us with trade facilitation issues or even business promotion issues. So this has to change at a philosophy level, not even at a policy level. Even at a philosophy level, that those change has to happen. We know that we are targeting to become a developed economy by 2041, and to reach there, trade will obviously play a major role. But the thought I want to leave you with. I'm an engineering student, but I have great passion for history. So what I want to tell you is this is not a pipe dream. This is not an empty daydream. Why? If you really look at history, you will see that when we talk about becoming a developed economy by 2041, we are coming round a full circle of prosperity, poverty, and back to prosperity. And this is something I want everyone to pay special attention to. 3 centuries ago, India accounted for 1/4 of world GDP. 3 centuries ago, 2/5 of the Indian economy came from Bengal. So what that means is 10% of global GDP was created right here. Economic historians also estimate that 1/5 of world trade, 20% of world trade emanated from Bengal 3 centuries ago. So when we talk about becoming a prosperous nation, let's not talk about the starvation that happened in 1943. Let's not create a picture where we are coming from a situation of prostitution to prosperity. Let us talk about a situation where we are closing that circle by becoming prosperous once again. So let's facilitate trade and reclaim our lost leading position in global trade and wealth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Habibullah Karim, for those historical statements. Yes, this land, this part of the world, is a very prosperous land. And from prosperity, we went to poverty, but we are back to prosperity. So thank you for reminding us. And I think trade and trade facilitation will be an essential part, critical part of that prosperity going forward. Thank you so much. May I now invite Mr. Mohammed Fazlul Haq, the former president of the Bangladesh Knitwear Exporters and Manufacturers Association, and who's the CEO and MD of Tami Fashions, a big exporter of a garment exporter of Bangladesh. So Mr. Fazlul Haq, the floor is yours. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Jayadi Sattar, the honorable chief guest, honorable special guest, and distinguished guest sitting in PRI conference room and across the world. Very good afternoon to everybody. And I would like to start with a experience I had from one of my friend who leading the country manager of one of the leading brands in the world. I can mention the name, better not to mention the name. One of the biggest brands in the apparel brands, and he was sharing the experience that brand is very known for the fast fashion. Normally they take the delivery from the date of order placement to delivery 35 to 40 days, and he was sharing the experience that normally from their headquarters in Europe they send one sample to different countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Vietnam, and few other countries when the big program, and to quote and make the counter samples. And what happened, then they're competing countries, they receive the parcel and they already quoted the price and even make the counter sample. And even by that time, they did not receive the parcel because of the bureaucracy at the airport. Everybody knows it that sample arrived in 3 days, but it needs 4 to 5 days to clear it from the customs in airport, even if it is one piece of t-shirt or piece of polo shirt, whatever it may be. So because of that, they're losing millions of dollars of business. So, and he told us, I tried, I met BGME president and many other high officials, but nothing changed. So that is what I shared this story that actually tell the overall situation of trade facilitation in terms of import and export in Bangladesh. And even I am experiencing one thing. I can share with my current similar experience. One of my parcel came from Brazil. I'm trying to develop some market there, and that parcel arrived on 28th of August in Dhaka airport by FedEx, and still I could not get it in hand. If I'm lucky that I will get it on tomorrow, and if I'm not lucky, I will get it maybe on Sunday. So that's the real scenario. So whatever the policy being made, whatever system being implemented, that is always improving, no doubt. But one thing is not, I think, not being improved a lot or remarkably is the attitude who are dealing or who are implementing the system and facilitation facilitation activities. So that's my experience, and I think everybody in the field would echo with me. Asif Bhai is there, and many others, and that the attitude, until and unless that attitude is changed, nothing will change. Because whatever system you take, but if the person, whatever computer, let's say you developed make a super computer, but the operator is not super, then you will not get the benefit of the supercomputer. That's exactly what I want to tell you. So I don't know, the Salman Bhai is here, and I can give you another example that I was watching at news a couple of months back, maybe. Salman Bhai was in airport, and he was just telling his frustration on TV and telling the customs officer, don't go after the packet of chocolates being brought by our wage earners from Middle East and other countries. Don't run after the packet of chocolates, packet of biscuits. So I heard it from Salman Bhai's mouth a couple of months back. So that's the attitude, the officers are in charge in different port, different station. So until and unless this attitude, this this mindset is changed, we cannot really go to the scale. Mr. Riyaz Mashroor, I think made the picture before us that what could be the potential we have. We all know the potential, but Salman Bhai is here, so they are working very hard. But those who are running the show, they have, I think, that attitude should be changed. That should be improved towards more friendly, not to find out the reason to block, rather to find out to reason to clear it. So that's the opposite attitude should take. And another important thing is that we need all of licenses. And the most of the license, maybe all, are 1 year validation. So that's make our life more complicated, starting from trade license, everything, bond license. The bond license renewal, it itself needs 4-5 months. So after getting the 4-5 months, and before I enjoying it properly, another notice of renewal comes. So that I think government can, from policy side, government can really think very seriously how they can increase this validation period from 1 year, at least for 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, with for different kind of certification. So these are the couple of very on-field practical problem we have been facing as an importer and as an exporter. And I totally agree with Dr. Masroor Riyaz that if we can really implement all kinds of trade facilitation, I'm not sure what percentage will be increased, but it will be increased a lot. And that we those who are working in the field, we know how much odd situation we are facing every day, and we have to fight. And we have to compete with the global leaders, global champions in this trade facilitation, like you mentioned, that India, Vietnam, even up to some extent China, So these are the things that we have a lot of the potentials. No doubt of that. We have a lot of energy, lot of resilience from the entrepreneur, from the worker side, but the facilitation in terms, and the policymakers also very friendly. They are working very hard. But those who are implementing, I think that's my submission, that I don't know how that can be changed, but it needs to be changed. It needs to be improved remarkably if we really want to touch the line mentioned by Dr. Masroor Riyaz. Thank you.
Mr. Fazul Haq, for sharing your experience as a leading garment exporter of Bangladesh. And you hit the nail on the head when you said we need to see change in attitude, change in mindset of people who are, managing the processes at the border. So I think we have to take your, thoughts into account, and I'm sure the policymakers and the high officials who are tuning in, they have heard you loud and clear. I hope something happens there. And I'm really surprised that when we say that ready-made garment sector is allowed this bonded facility, this is a great policy decision taken by Bangladesh government very early on. It was the right thing to do. But you tell us that there are problems in license renewal and things like that. I'm sure our honorable chief guest will be able to, take some action on this particular thing.
Just to add that Salman Bhai is here, that if we can increase the validation period from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years, at least we can minimize this problem a bit.
We agree, and we are transferring this request to our honorable chief guest. I'm sure he will take note of it. Thank you so much. May I now invite our next distinguished panelist, Mr. Asif Ibrahim, who is the director of the other leading garment export association, BGMEA, and he's also the chairman of the Chittagong Stock Exchange. So, Mr. Asif Ibrahim, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, distinguished chief guest, and of course, I must acknowledge the State Minister and also the other panelists and the keynote presenter for coming out with a very nice paper, connecting trade facilitation and export competitiveness at a time when we are looking at very challenging days ahead for our export, at least because of the impending LDC graduation and the 9% of tariff reduction, which Masur mentioned in European Union, which is our strongest export destination. Before going into the recommendations, I would like to give a little bit of a background because of my 11 years of experience in dealing with public-private dialogue issues to address policy reforms in this country. We have made a significant progress in 2011 when we set up BUILD, constituted, which was an effort of Dhaka Chamber, Metropolitan Chamber, and Chittagong Chamber. We set up Private Sector Development Policy Coordination Committee in the Honorable Prime Minister's office, headed by the Principal Secretary. 12 secretaries who are relevant for private sector growth sat on the one side of the table, and business leaders sat on other side of the table. And we tried to address issues of policy reform, and we achieved some success. I'll give you one example. We were able to ensure that for renewal of IRC and ERC, which is export registration and import registration, a businessman did not have to go to the CCIND. It could be done automatically in the bank. So we thought it was great, fantastic, we've done a reform. But what happened after 6 months? It reversed. It went back to normal. So first thing we have to address before addressing anything further is that if we do a reform, let us stick to it and not go back to where we were. The next issue I want to address is the issue of the bonded warehouse issue, which was mentioned by Mr. Fazlul Haq, and also the issue of particularly when the RMG sector is shifting towards from basic products to value-added products. A lot of the items that are not in the HS code list of the customs are, for example, an RFID tag is not listed. And that is a big problem because every time we are trying to get those samples in, the hassles that has been mentioned by Mr. Fazlul Haq, we are facing problems. And for that, the exports are getting delayed. And when an export gets delayed, it causes air shipment on behalf, for the exporter. So it creates a bad impression in the to the buyers as well. So these are the issues that we need to look into when we talk about automation. When we are talking about fixing the automating the customs from different development agency projects, we must also ensure that we take into cognizance the issue of bringing those new items into the list as well for bonded warehouse. So that is the second issue that I want to talk about. The third issue that I want to talk about is the issue of driving reform, which is very important. And I must mention it because the chief guest who's here is a firm believer in reform. And I was very lucky to be assisting him in a particular period when he had just taken over as the advisor. We, in a span of a few days, were able to set up meetings in NBR, Bangladesh Bank, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Local Governments, the Ministry of Finance, and we were able to identify the issues regarding the then Ease of Doing Business Index. And because of those meetings which were held, we were able to bring it down from 176 to 168. If you want to put Dui Moi in Bangladesh, following Vietnam's example, it is possible. It is possible if the political will is there, and if you want to drive the change. It's about the mindset, which Mr. Karim talked about. It's about the mindset which Mr. Fazlul Haq talked about. Export diversification was also addressed. RMG 78% 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 83% now. The next sector which crossed the $1 billion threshold was leather and footwear. What happened? When it was moved to Savar, it fell backward because of the CETP issue there, because it's not internationally compliant. And efforts were made, led by the advisor himself and the Minister of Industries himself, and some of the leading exporters and some business leaders. We went there, we saw it ourselves. And we must ensure that these kind of projects are given to the right organization which can implement. BSIC is not an agency which is capable of taking up a responsibility of such a project of this magnitude. It should have been given to BEBSA, who has got the experience of setting up export processing zones across the country successfully. So these are some of the issues. I mean, had we done it properly, probably leather and footwear could have gone to $3.5–4 billion by now. Okay, now let's come back to the recommendations. I'm getting a bit excited. Please forgive me because years of frustrations pile up when one speaks. You talked about quick implementation of the national single window for trade, which is good, but I think this implementation, I don't know whether it includes transaction modules, particularly to facilitate electronic payment facilities. So I would like to know whether the NSW has that facility. You talk about risk-based custom control for reduced inspection. This is where, of course, the HS code jhamela of the exporters come under. So we need to see that as well. In terms of the testing, which is a big problem still, I think the government should seriously consider giving concessions to private sector service providers for inspection, for quarantine, and for testing. That it would be a recommendation that I would put in this roundtable. Another thing that I want to mention is that we have a sizable economy. We've done remarkable progress under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister. The decade of particularly in the last decade, the economic growth that we saw. But in this country, we do have a stock market, but we didn't have a commodities exchange yet. But Chittagong Stock Exchange is given the responsibility. This is where the issue of the cold chain infrastructure for perishable goods comes in. CSE is already in talks with Nippon Express of Japan. And we know that IFC's got a project going with one of the leading exporters of commodities, agriculture commodities, which is Golden Harvest. So these kind of partnerships going forward will help us achieve, particularly now that we have built our Pride, the Padma Bridge, the other side, the 21 districts which are now connected. We could really see some improvements in those areas. So I think emphasis should be given in that area as well. I'm not gonna go further into being in a critical mode. Let us get into an optimistic mode and say that from this conference at least, or from this roundtable at least, we can put in some concrete suggestions to the Honorable Advisor and to the Honorable State Minister for Planning. Maybe if we can, and of course the representative of NBR, because NBR is the key. If we want to make changes in this country, if we want to automate, National Board of Revenue has to lead the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You hit the nail on the head. NBR is the organization, the institution of government that will be in the forefront, making these changes, taking the measures. Thank you so much. So, but you've talked about mindset change. That's very important, very critical. Thank you. Our final distinguished panelist, Mr. Inamul Haq, has been waiting with a lot of patience. Thank you so much for your patience and understanding. The floor is yours, Mr. Inamul Haq, Managing Director and Country Head of Corporate, Commercial and Institutional Banking, Standard Chartered Bank, Bangladesh. And Standard Chartered Bank is facilitating trade and payments. And we'd like to hear something about on that front, please. Mr. Inamul Haq, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks to Chair Mr. Jayadi Sattar for organizing such an important session today. Greetings to my distinguished speakers as well as Chief Guest Mr. Salman Rahman. I'd like to start by touching upon some of the key aspects touched by our valued speaker, Mr. Mashoor Riyaz. As trade volume of Bangladesh grows exponentially, trade facilitation, especially the logistics surrounding trade, will be critical to enable this. He highlighted how reforms addressing a simpler border and custom clearance, logistics, infrastructure, port system had lowered the cost and growth in export volumes. The country has a strong export aspiration. The 2021-24 National Export Policy export target about $80 billion, which is 50% more than export of fiscal year 2022. On that role, one of the critical goals is to have a single window for regulatory process. For example, there are 39 government agencies that are involved in customs-related activities, and a single window for all of them would have helped import and exports. Customs duty payment is now automated as well. Other tax payments are also being digitized gradually. However, foreign banks are still not part of online submission of challans, which we are pursuing NBR for a while. Mr. Mashurias touched upon the Doi Mui program of Vietnam. Many times we see a comparable being drawn between Vietnam and export-oriented growth and the growth of a model of Bangladesh. Yes, Vietnam's export is $300 billion, but at the same time, we need to remember that last fiscal year, Vietnam imported $270 billion, which indicates a high imported content of the exports. However, Vietnam is a tale of two economies, with the domestic market dominated by large state-owned enterprises and multiple SMEs. The industrialization in Bangladesh has been more domestic market focused other than RMG and textile since inception. So the tariff structure, while being liberalized over the years, it is focused on domestic industry, which is a gap between output and input tariff remaining high. When domestic companies come to export, they come out of the environment and need to face the challenges on three fronts. One is overseas marketing and distribution network, different regulations for each export market, and competition on a global scale. No matter what the scale of the company is, technically advisory support is needed to build the capacity initially to access new export market. However, we are seeing that local companies that focus on productivity, efficiency, and supported by the sustainable growth governance framework have been exporting in emerging sectors such as electronics, food and beverage, pharmaceutical, plastic products. I'd like to give a view on sustainability as a key enabler for growing demand in terms of trade diversifications. As a country formally graduated from LDC status, the exception from the country in the international market will be different. In addition to improving infrastructure to reduce transaction cost, regulatory reform, the other theme that will become increasingly important is environmental, social, and governance criteria. For example, with the expiry of a EU duty benefit under GSP, we'll need to become eligible for GSP Plus, where the exception of ESG is much higher. Investors are demanding sustainability as a priority. Investors are shifting incentives as a financial market start to take the environmental seriously. Funding deals are like from H&M, Adidas, and Chanel all prove that opportunity for lower cost of capital tied to higher ESG program. Meanwhile, CEOs and CFOs are increasingly having to demonstrate to their investor base where public-private markets, they are taking their environmental and social impact and risk seriously. We do have 105 apparel companies which contributes almost 25% of the export of the country and towards the journey of sustainability. H&M has committed to buying 100% recyclable sourcing by 2030. Similar sort of stance from most of the garments plans that we see, where our BGME has taken a plan to $100 billion sort of a target by 2030. There are a number of initiatives that they have taken, and it has to be gradually moved, like 20% reduction in carbon emissions, 20% use of renewable energy, 30% on efficiency of energy consumptions, 50% reduction of water uses. We are privileged to have the largest number of LEED certified factories globally in Bangladesh. On that note, I'd like to highlight about Standard Chartered Bank's role. So Standard Chartered Bank in a country like Bangladesh contributes almost 14% of trade, 9.5% directly, and the rest through the confirmation channel. So 14% contributes a significant portion of countries' trade business in this country. On a policy and regulatory framework side, as a bank, we remain engaged with our domestic and network clients, consolidated the feedback for policy considerations. Recent amendments of import policy enables first paperless cross-border LC facilitated by Standard Chartered. Client can apply for an LC online using bank's digital portal, and there is no requirement to submit single signed physical copy of the applications. We have gone one step beyond by being the first bank in the country where we have issued a cross-border blockchain LC transactions, which is one of the 12 global banks on the Contour network at this point of time. Just to highlight about the blockchain can also pave the way for end-to-end digital customs and simplify the process for all parties involved. All the parties generating shipping and goods certified related to documents being trusted digital platform enable data integrity supported by complete audit trail. This can go a long way to reduce revenue risk through improper value of goods category declarations, trade risk aspiration from quality of goods to quantity of goods, inspections, validity on that front. In conclusion, I'd like to touch upon that trade facilitation, policy reforms, process simplifications, one-stop service will be critical to promote cost efficiency import and export in Bangladesh. At client front, sustainability will be the key aspects that leading buyers will be looked at. Financial institutions will need to step up in terms of digitizing and advancement in blockchain technology, which coupled with government initiative to streamline the logistics of trade will enable Bangladesh to take the next step in terms of trade competitiveness. Lastly, with LDC graduation, I think it's important for us to expand our horizon, especially like RCEP sort of a platform. At least we need to be listed ourselves as a dialogue partner to start with, because the global markets are getting integrated. So why we need to position ourselves faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nawal Haq. You made some very interesting, very important points, like suggesting that Bangladesh should take part in some contact with the RCEP. I mean, that's one of the largest trading blocks in the world right now. And Asia, with growing GDP of Asia, RCEP is going to become a leading trading bloc in the future as well. Most importantly, you talked about using blockchain technology. That's a step ahead of the current electronic digitized processing that you have also encouraged. So I'm hopeful that maybe this is a step up in the technology world, which will help facilitate trade in the future. So thank you for bringing these up, and may I now proceed to our next guest. This time I'm going to request Nusrat Babi, who was earlier a member of the IFC, but is now part of the World Bank, but still member of the World Bank crew. She has been the critical person in promoting the project relating to this trade facilitation and other, trade policy studies that are supposed to promote export diversification. So the past half a dozen years, I've known Nusrat Babi to be promoting all these projects out of the IFC, and now I'm sure she will be doing the same through the World Bank. Nusrat, would you please share some of your thoughts very quickly, and then we'll move to our IFC country manager. Okay.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon, everyone. My respect to Honorable Chief Guest, distinguished panelists, and all the members who are from development community and the media who are present here. So I would like to share a couple of facts. Number one is like when we started this project back in 2017 and early 2018, we had conducted a baseline survey to understand like what's the export and import clearance time at 4 key custom houses that we were actually focusing on. And back then, what we saw is that the Chattogram Custom House, which is managing 90% of the trade in Bangladesh, the import clearance time was roughly around 61 hours. And as we end the project now, we did an inline survey and we found that the import clearance time has been reduced significantly. It has come down to something around 46 hours, starting from this ITM submission to the clearance of goods. But we did not see, I mean, that's a very good move. I would say the Chattogram has reduced the clearance time, but we did not see that much of change happening at Dhaka Custom House or Benapol Custom House or even Dhaka ICT Custom House. So our distinguished panelist, Fazul Haq Bhai, he was talking about like maybe he's expecting the delivery tomorrow or if he's lucky, but otherwise next week. So this is something that I would like to bring the attention of NBR of, like, since they have also done the time release study, these figures are coming up and which showcases that in Chattogram, even though a lot of improvements are happening, and there is a positive move that Customs Risk Management Commissionerate has been set up, and NBR has also set a target to introduce 60% green channel through Chattogram Custom House in the next couple of years. But we would like to see similar things happening across Bangladesh because trade is not just happening through Chattogram. With all these infrastructure development, the ports are opening up, the land ports, the airport. I guess we need to have a similar mindset and approach for all these custom ports which are around Bangladesh. Again, in terms of like this national single window for trade, I guess like that's one of the challenging assignment that we had taken up, and where a number of like 39 government agencies with around 208 trade-related services are coming under one platform. But at the same time, we did see there was significant delay in implementing the project. So I guess Asif Bhai was talking about frustration. So I guess going forward, we will be able to like minimize these delays and deliver completely on what was promised in the beginning. I would like to mention another issue related to the Tfa Compliance Progress. As Hafiz sir was talking about, like in 2015, we had done an assessment of Tfa compliance for Bangladesh, and we found that out of all the measures, Bangladesh's compliance was roughly around 20%. In 2019, we repeated the survey and we found that it had increased to 53%. But what I would say, from 23% to 53%, that's a huge jump. But most of the changes are happening because maybe some of the measures are being taken up by customs. We did see customs did come up with customs modernization strategy action plan, which outlined their broader reform agenda. But the other government agencies, they also have to come up jointly. And as I say this, this becomes even more relevant because Bangladesh is now talking about trade logistics. Bangladesh is working on a comprehensive logistics policy in which we did see that 9 ministries and roughly around 21 government agencies are involved. So this issue becomes even more relevant, bringing everyone together, having a coordinated strategy, the road, rail, maritime transport, all of them. I mean, they have this individual strategies, but we have to bring everyone together. And what I would say, like, I guess, like Azadi was mentioning repeatedly about my involvement in the World Bank Group. But what I would like to mention is that even though we have been implementing this project from IFC with the funding from FCDO, we did have very good collaboration across the World Bank Group. We used all our instruments like the jobs, the development policy, credit operation. Then we also have project financing in regional connectivity project and all these projects with which we could deliver a very good result through this project. And going forward, we look forward to supporting Bangladesh with all our instruments again, as we are talking about broader reform agenda in trade logistics. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nusrat Babi, for this intervention. Very helpful. I think you've given us the information of what IFC World Bank Group has been doing in facilitating trade and promoting trade. Before I turn to our guest from IFC, our country manager, I can give a minute to our two former Commerce Secretary, a minute to you. Sorry, I only have a minute, and to Salman, to Kamran Rahman.
I just came to listen.
You're okay? Mr. Kamran Rahman, 1 minute intervention, please.
Sorry, you don't need that. Oh, yeah, the mic. Thank you very much, Mr. Zaidi Sattar, for inviting me to this session. Very glad to hear some of the things that you mentioned in your opening statement, which is lack of direction in our trade policy in Bangladesh for a very long time, didn't actually lead us to the right path. However, we have been addressing those issues and we are on the right path. And now Bangladesh is well integrated into the world economy through our trade and factor services. One of the things that you mentioned, which I had never heard before in any of these discussions on trade facilitation, is when we talk of trade facilitation, we should not talk of trade in goods only. We should also talk about the factor services. And you mentioned we need to address goods trade, but also the rising trade in non-factor services such as ICT, financial services, including digital and electronic transactions. And C, factor services that is generating remittance from migrant workers. Now we need to note that we are actually adding around 2 million people in the labor market every year. And these people are mostly going to the Gulf countries and sending us remittances. Now, if we look at the average or per capita remittances or earnings of our migrant workers in the Gulf countries, we will probably find that our average migrant workers' income is probably a third, between half and a third of what an Indian migrant worker earns, and probably a fourth of what a Sri Lankan migrant worker earns. That is something because of the skills that we impart, or the skills with which they're going to the Gulf countries. If we can address that, if we can send them with the right skills, our income from the labor market is going to be way above what it is at present. These are the few things that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good point. I think, yeah, the skill intensity of our migrant workers is bare minimum right now and needs to be upgraded. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite our FCDO friend who must be waiting with a lot of patience. We have 5 minutes for Dr. Duncan Overfield. I'm sorry that, in the interest of time, I'm offering 5 minutes to you. Are you there? Oh, there we are. Yeah, Duncan, floor is yours. Unmute. You have to unmute, please. Please unmute. Unmute, please. We can't hear you.
Technical.
Can I ask one question while he's... I forgot to mention something that Dr. Riaz mentioned. He brought in the issue of Vietnam and the enormous exports that they are able to do. I just wanted to ask him one question. Does proximity of Vietnam to China?
It's one of the big
factors.
One of the factors.
Proximity and the race.
I guess we are not being able to connect with. Is it okay now? Can you
just?
Oh yeah, you're fine. Good. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Sorry. Apologies, I've been moving between different platforms this morning and the settings were not correct. So my fault. Thank you very much. Please, it's been absolutely fantastic just listening to all the debate and sort of an excellent presentation. I think it's very clear global evidence, trade, growth and development. You know, very, very strong evidence, all well connected, but I think we all know it when it actually comes to the practical parts of actually making things happen, it's very, very complicated and a very messy process sort of to make things sort of like come together, partly because there are so many stakeholders, there are so many things that need to be addressed, so many agencies to be involved. It's amazing that progress is ever made, but it has been, and I think Bangladesh is a very good example of that. I mean, Bangladesh obviously huge progress over the last 3 decades in terms of sort of developing export orientated industries, including services, which has been mentioned sort of quite a few times. And export competitiveness is just going to be absolutely critical in the next set of decades that are approaching. Well, I mean, competitiveness, I mean, it's determined by the quality and the pricing points, but trade facilitation has just an absolutely critical role to do this, and trade facilitation will have an absolutely central role in determining where Bangladesh goes over the next few years. I think there are so many areas. It's certainly when we're thinking about it from the UK government side, we tend to think of trade facilitation in 3 big buckets. There are all the issues to do with the borders and the clearance procedures, all the issues to do with sort of reducing transaction costs, issues around sort of the institutional and sort of policy challenges, as well as addressing the very, very large sort of infrastructure issues. And this is why we take an approach of working both at the country level and sort of more broadly across the region. So we've been providing sort of TA support mainly through our IFI colleagues, both at a regional level and at sort of a country level, to assist on all of these areas. I mean, I think we can see there's been huge amounts of progress sort of within Bangladesh and within the region, but there is still so far to travel in terms of sort of getting to the point where Bangladesh and South Asia needs to be highly competitive and support its citizens through the next bits of sort of development. The evidence is very strong that everything needs to be addressed in parallel, and to be very aware, very wide-eyed about sort of the complexity of the political economy that sit under each of the different areas sort of to move forward. And then we will continue sort of to work in all these areas. There's perhaps just one point that I would just like to focus on a little bit, perhaps more than anything else, and it's just about the importance of sort of enabling policy initiatives across the region. I think one that's probably very useful to focus on is the BBIM motor vehicles agreement. The potential transformational impact of that is considerable, and the progress that has been made on that over the last few years has been pretty good in some aspects, but it just highlights both the opportunities and the challenges that are in place, that if you need to sort of advance on this. Theoretically, that could allow sort of like truck drivers and trucks sort of to move relatively seamlessly through the borders between the 4 different countries. But of course, the complexity of making that actually happen, the permits that are required for vehicles to travel across, the driving licenses, the visa requirements, it just piles up and up and up, and all these things just add to the costs. And it's obviously very challenging to move forward to implementation on that. So I think the evidence as well just sort of points to sort of the very high returns on what are sort of like policy changes. Things like the infrastructure are very expensive. The returns are a little bit lower on that, but all these things have to come together. And this is certainly something that we want to bring together in all of the interventions that we do, and that we will continue to work with Bangladesh and the region on sort of this absolutely critical area of sort of development. We are just in the process of reviewing our economic growth strategy in terms of what we do within FCDO, and we are going to continue to work on sort of economic policy areas. We will continue to work on investment climate and broader sort of market building activities, but we are adding a specific area of work on regional economic integration, as we just see that as being absolutely critical in terms of sort of like moving forward and helping support sort of Bangladesh on that. Yeah. And then perhaps the other thing I should just say as well, we were just talking about sort of graduation from GSP, etc. I was just going to give a little plug for the new developing country trading scheme that the UK will implement from 2023, which will extend duty-free access to the UK market for a considerable amount, of which Bangladesh is likely to be the largest single beneficiary of that global scheme, but also quite critically is it liberalizes and eases up issues to do with rules of origin, which also could just help strengthen Bangladesh's position in regional and global supply chains. I'd say thank you very much. I will stop at that point, but just to focus in on that area that, you know, especially the issues around policy and sort of those stroke of pen reforms are absolutely as critical as all the other elements as well, and that we're very happy to work this. And thank you very much for inviting me into this. I'm a relatively new arrival in Bangladesh, but very much looking forward to working with everybody and all the stakeholders over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience and understanding, and for pointing out that enabling policies are very critical for Bangladesh's export competitiveness in the future. May I now have the pleasure to invite the country manager of the International Finance Corporation, IFC, Mr. Martin Holtman.
Thank you, and I'll be very
yours.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I understand we're racing against time here. So thank you, Dr. Sattar, and just a shout out to our chief guest, the Honorable Advisor to the Prime Minister, Mr. Rahman. I continue to be impressed just by the scope of areas that you overlook. It's just amazing. So because I keep popping up in meetings that are graced by your presence and your wisdom. Also, of course, Honorable State Minister for Planning, very nice to meet you virtually. Dr. Sattar gave us a little bit of a history of the economics of trade and you know why it's beneficial. So I want to add maybe a little glimpse here. My Egyptian economics professor back in Germany always predicted that Jagdish Bhagwati would win the Nobel Prize for his work on globalization and trade, right? Unfortunately, he didn't get the prize, but he certainly is one of the people that did the most work on this. He, that same professor, the Egyptian, made me write a paper on the benefits and costs of import substitution versus export diversification. And this is 30 years ago. And I'm delighted to be in discussions exactly on these points. Now, one thing that I took away from that paper and from the research was that one of the lessons was that it's not either or. Right? It's not either we only do import substitution or we only do export diversification. We have to do both at the same time. And I think Bangladesh is a good example of that. But it's also an example of that it's so important not to miss the best time to move from one to the other, right? And to open up. And I think this is the discussion that we're in here more than anything else. I'm going to spare you with lots of the points that were already made by others. I do take one point that for us as IFC is very, very important, and that is in the current eighth five-year plan, the target is set to reach a 3% FDI as of 2025. We have a long way to go. Gosh, we have a long way to go. It's creeping up from 1 to 1.5%, but it's embarrassingly low. Let me just say it very clearly. It's embarrassingly low for a country of the stature, the size, and the internal market like Bangladesh. It's almost a joke, right? And so I think we have a lot to do, and we as IFC want to do whatever we can to help, to assist, and to lure in those foreign investors, right? So please help us with that. My job is to move our investments to 1 billion a year. That's 10 times more than we did last year. Okay, so I need all the help I can get, and I'm very pleased to see that so much progress has been made. I take actually a lot of very positive news from this workshop. There's a lot of very good things happening, including collective action on the government side. I'll stop with a last lesson from this Egyptian professor who I think of a lot. It was a very clear teacher. And he always said, beware of monocausal explanations. Monocausal explanations. We tend to say, oh, this is good. And that's why, maybe because Vietnam is close to China, that's why no, it's usually the world is more complex than that. And so I think we need to think beyond just the trade policies and customs relaxations. We need to think about education. You just mentioned that. We need to think of entrepreneurships and how to get the entrepreneurs to move away from the comfortable and their zone of excellence, which is the garments, to other areas. We need to think of the regional trade. I think Duncan just mentioned that. And by the way, we're very grateful for FCDO's support for all this work. We need to think of public sector reform and digitization. We just had a workshop on digitization just yesterday. Mr. Karim was there. We keep popping up on the same panels. So last 2 points I will make is let's not be afraid of copying from others. The private sector does it all the time, right? You just go and you see what the competitor does that's better than you, and you just engage in it. Banks do it all the time. They walk as mystery customers into each other's branches and they check what do these guys do that I'm not doing, right? So why wouldn't we do that here? Sure. And last but not least, I think we really need to put ourselves in the shoes of the customers. Customer journeys are also one thing that the private sector does a lot, especially in the digital space. So let's think of customer journeys. And when my neighbor in Gulshan just tells me he represents a very large electronics company here in the country, he's the country manager, and he tells me that he had to go personally to get his container from Korea and had to pay $3,700 import duty for items that just for his personal use from his home in Korea, that makes me think that that customer journey could be improved in the future. So I'll stop here and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin Hoffman, country manager of the IFC, for really making very important point. FDI, we all agree, embarrassingly low. We have to do something about it. And thanks, IFC is promising to assist us in that very endeavor. And the $1 billion of target that IFC is putting, good, definitely encouraging. So we look forward to that. Our chief guest has been waiting with a lot of patience and a lot of understanding, and we apologize for taking the extra time, but we now are eager and very, very eager to listen to you. And you are the real expert on the field. We are, in the theoretical world. So we are looking forward to your ideas and thoughts to share with this group. So welcome, Mr. Salman Fazlur Rahman, MP, advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister for Private Industry and Investment, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. The floor is yours.
Our State Minister of Planning had to leave.
I sent him a message. There was no message from him. I don't. Is the State Minister for Planning available? I sent him a message, but got no response. He was an invited guest. He didn't have any special demand. If anybody could, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Zaidi Sattar, Chairman of PRI, Dr. Hassan Mansoor, Executive Director, and distinguished panelists. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. At the outset, I'd like to congratulate PRI for organizing this very timely webinar. And as usual, whenever I attend PRI events, I find it very, very informative and also very, very stimulative. I would have liked to start by congratulating Dr. M. Masood Riaz for his very, very informative presentation, keynote presentation. And, whenever we are told that Masroor is going to give a presentation, we all expect that we are going to see something of very high quality. And today he hasn't disappointed us again. As usual, his presentation was of a very, I'm sure all of you will agree, was of, it gave us a lot of information to think about. So the actually, basically, the fact that trade is very, very important for economic growth, that is something which is, it's something which is not rocket science. We all know that. And in fact, Bangladesh's progress over the last 15 years has happened because of that. In fact, one of the speakers mentioned that our trade since 2001 has grown 20 times or 9 times. So that is, and since our GDP has also grown in the last 14 years, it's grown 10 times. So in fact, more than 10 times. That the contribution of trade is definitely goes without any question. How do we make the trading environment more business friendly and create a more enabling environment? So you have heard that a lot of work is being done, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank IFC and the World Bank and also our other development partners, the Asian Development Bank, and everyone for the kind of support that we are being given. Especially the one of the main reasons for Bangladesh's success has been the preferential access to the markets with various global markets which we have received as a least developed country. And as was pointed out, that now that we are graduating, many of these facilities will have to be renegotiated. And I think that process has started. What I personally have been seeing, and what I have been, is that on the first issue, let me talk a bit about exports first. I have always advocated, and Honorable Prime Minister has mentioned this a number of times. And what I have actually advocated is that nothing succeeds like success. And the fact that our garment industry has been very successful is an accepted fact. So instead of reinventing the wheel, why don't we give all other export sectors the same facilities which we have given to the garment industry? And although it is, everybody says, yes, it's a good idea, we should do it, but somehow other sectors are complaining that they are not getting the same facilities. Bonded warehouse facility was mentioned, but I'm not only restricting this to bonded warehouse. There are many other facilities which the garment industry gets. And I think that has to be given to the other sectors if we want to diversify our export. What has happened, as you can see, is, as one of the speakers pointed out, that instead of the concentration reducing, the concentration in garments has actually increased. And this, I think, we need to seriously look at this, because one of the weaknesses of our growth story as well as our growth strategy, I would say, is the fact that we are overly dependent on RMG exports. The other issue which I would like to talk about is logistics. Now, and the points made on logistics are very, very important. And I think that is the key. and a lot of work is being done, but I think a lot more needs to be done, which has been the generally which everybody has said. Let me address the ports first. You'll be pleased to know that in the ports, the government has already started negotiation with 2 foreign operators for giving the Patenga terminal and the new mooring terminal to foreign operators. That decision is taken and also negotiations have started. One with the Red Sea port of Saudi Arabia and the other with DP World of UAE. So that at least I feel that once foreign operators bring in, they will bring in new technology, they will increase the efficiency, and we will be able to, the port efficiency will improve a lot. The other is that the Bay Terminal. The Bay Terminal work on that is happening, and once that happens, and say maybe it will take another 3 to 4 years before the Bay Terminal is operative, the capacity of Chittagong port will increase. Then we are talking of Matabari, where the deep sea port is being built. That also hopefully should be ready in 4 to 5 years. So that the government recognizes very much that for us to go to the next level of trade, increasing the port facilities is very, very important. In fact, I think Matabari, when the deep sea port comes, that will be a game changer for Bangladesh, because what we have achieved so far, we have been able to do with only a river port and not a deep sea port. So that would really add to our, contribute towards increasing our exports substantially. Then what we are also doing is we are working on moving the ICT container from Dhaka railway station to Ghazipur. Once that is done, we want to have a logistics corridor for export. So the work on that is also being done. I am looking into very seriously on how to get the private sector, both the local private sector and the foreign private sector involved, to increase, to get the involvement to increase in the logistics sector. We need more investment, and I think we need the private sector to get much more involved. In order to do that, as has been mentioned, and although work is being done on that front, there has to be a realization from the government agencies that our job, even in logistics, that our job should be that of creating an enabling environment, and the logistics should be left to the private sector. And our job should basically be that of a regulator and not to get involved itself in the logistics. So, you know, things like the operation of the airports and the operation of the ports, we should actually, the fact that the government has to do it themselves, I think we have to move away from that thinking. The other issue which I would like to address is on coming back to exports on diversification. That is very, very important, and I feel that there are a number of sectors which we have identified and we should really build on. And you know, leather has been one, but because, as was mentioned, that because of the CETP issue, we had some setbacks, but I'm pleased to inform you that that problem is now more or less resolved. The CETP is now functioning, and now I think they are waiting for certification. And once that happens, I think the issue of the leather sector will improve. The other areas where we would like to concentrate is furniture, bicycles. You know, these are small export items at the moment, but there's a huge potential. And I think if we were to actually provide them the kind of support that we have provided to the RMG industry, there's a potential for these sectors also to become large export earners. The other area, of course, is ICT, and you know that on ICT a lot of work is being done, and there again this has been and in ICT you have export. There are, you see, one is the actual it's more service related exports which was mentioned, and that is very, very important. And that again, because of the kind of infrastructure, the digital infrastructure which we have been able to create all over Bangladesh. We have a fiber optic backbone which goes up to the village level. We have over 650,000 freelancers working from their homes. We are providing 4G and about to go into 5G bandwidth at the village level. So all of this will really help. I mean, this is another sector which I think can be. So on export diversification, also a lot of work is being done. However, what I have always mentioned, and that is very important, and this has been my, and I have mentioned this publicly before, that what I am now finding, that at the higher level of the bureaucracy, at the senior level of the bureaucracy, the realization that major reforms is required is there. And when you talk to senior bureaucrats, or when I speak to senior bureaucrats, or when you hear them speaking in webinars like this, like we saw our my two colleagues from the NBR and from the Commerce Ministry addressing us today, they were extremely positive, and they realized that reforms is necessary. So I think at the senior bureaucracy level, this realization now is there. Unfortunately, at the field level, I think this hasn't trickled down. And I think our challenge now for the senior bureaucracy is to make they should ensure that of what they themselves are convinced. There now, I think, big challenge is to make their junior colleagues realize that, and in the field level to implement that. And as you have mentioned, you need a change of attitude, you need a change of mindset. Well, I think the change in attitude and mindset at the senior level is taking place, and that is very, very positive. Now we need to make sure that trickles down to the junior level, especially at the field level. So, you know, the kind of problems which we have heard from the actual players in the field. So those are, of course, we need to address those definitely. Another area I think we have to be very, very, which was mentioned by, I think, Dr. Zaidi Sattar or Hassan Mansoor, I don't remember, in the opening remarks, was the geopolitical compulsions which we are now seeing. And we have to also take these into account. This is something, you see, the way globalization was going on, and until the Ukraine-Russian war started, we could never imagine that the kind of challenges global trade is facing today was unimaginable. You know, if 2-3 years ago somebody were to tell us that this would be the situation of the supply chain, you know, people would say, no, this cannot happen. The world has gone beyond this, and you know, global supply chains is so firmly entrenched that the link cannot be broken. But the various links in the chain cannot be broken. But unfortunately, we today are experiencing serious disruption in the supply chains for geopolitical reasons. And I think countries like Bangladesh need to have need to devise a strategy how to meet this challenge. And I think one of the main areas in which Bangladesh should look at is, and which has been mentioned in today's webinar also, is that we need to look at trading partners other than our traditional trading partners. We have to look more within our own region. We have to look, like RCEP was mentioned, then. So we have to see that we are not dependent on trade in just like you are talking about concentration of dependence on one export item, the similarly dependence on one area of the world market. We should, try to diversify the market also and go into. So those are areas which we need to look at. And this, I think, the supply chain challenges which we are now facing, as time goes by, I think various other solutions to this will have to be found. And I would again request that organizations like PRI and Policy Exchange, the World Bank, IFC, other development partners, this is another area where you will have to do some more work and research on how the supply chain problem, because of geopolitical issues which have been created, the disruption which have taken place in the supply chain, how these will be addressed and what is the best way forward for both developing and developed countries. So the other point I wanted to mention was also there is a huge, in supply chains now we will find, there is, and this was also mentioned by one of the speakers, sustainability is going to be a very important factor. And there again, because of the geopolitical situation, people, where one had targeted that we would be going to zero emissions, we are now having to, because of the energy crisis, many of the countries in Europe are having to reverse their strategy on this. Germany is thinking of reopening its coal power plants. So that is another issue which needs to be addressed. And because of climate change, it is the countries like ours who are the most badly affected because of the irresponsible behavior of the developing countries in the past. We are seeing the kind of floods which Pakistan is now experiencing, the drought which is being experienced. So it's not only the us, also the developed countries themselves, the kind of effects of climate change which we are seeing in the United States and in fact globally all over the world, in Europe, in China. But of course, countries like ours are much more vulnerable. And if some climate change effect takes place in our country, then we are much more badly affected than the more developed countries. So these are also areas, I think, which will ultimately is very much linked to the global trade situation. So I think I will stop here. I have more or less, I would just like to reiterate that my conclusions of today's webinar is that global trade is definitely very, very important. And the more our trade, global trade increases, it is better for the economy, and as the economy grows and thrives, it is the people of the country who also benefit. So that's the first. Second is that in order to do that, we need to make trade very, very easy. You have to create an environment where trade, people who are importing and exporting can do it seamlessly, easily, and many areas were identified which need to be fixed. And I think a lot is being done and a lot more needs to be done. Third is that we definitely need a change in attitude, change in mindset, especially at the field level, so that once the regulatory reforms are done at the macro level, those are properly implemented at the micro level. And so that needs to be ensured. And lastly, I think we should all think about the geopolitical situation which is prevailing in the world at this moment, how it is going to affect our supply chains and also sustainability. So I think with these words, again, I would like to thank PRI for inviting me to be the chief guest in today's webinar. And I would like to thank all the participants for your valuable interventions and discussions. And like I said in the beginning, I'll conclude that it is always a pleasure to be part of a event sponsored by PRI. So thank you all very much. Joy Bangladesh.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your very aspirational observations. Thank you for taking the time and for your patience and understanding. I will take just 1 minute just to, you have covered all the aspects, starting from trade policy to trade logistics, and then also on sustainability of our progress. So there's very little to add, but I would like to say that you are spot on when you say that ready-made garments is our success story. So why do we have to reinvent the wheel? Whatever policies, whatever things we have done for the ready-made garment, just replicate it for the other export sectors. And we should then get the export diversification that we are talking about. So why is it not happening? We have not been able to progress much on diversifying our export commodity part. Of course, there's been some progress in diversification of markets, but what is not happening when it comes to diversification of products? And I would like to sit down with you sometime, on a one-on-one basis to talk, to suggest what is really the stumbling block. Maybe this is not going to be the platform, but sometime later we could do that.
No, I would suggest, Dr. Satta, why don't you organize a webinar on this itself? And I think there we should get what we should do is we should not only have the senior representatives of the bureaucracy, but we should also have some field level officers there also.
Okay.
For example, in today's webinar, I think the Dhaka Customs House Commissioner would have been a good participant. We could have listened from him what are the issues that he faces. For example, what was mentioned, and since the member customs is still with us, I think I'll flag it right now, is that what is happening is that now a lot of new kind of samples arrive, and these samples have got new accessories, a lot of new, because the fashion industry is changing and garments are changing. So, where we had in the old days, our accessories used to be zips and buttons and labels, and now a lot of other things are coming in as new items. And the Dhaka Customs, whenever they say that, well, these are new accessories, these are not in the bonded list, so I will not release it. So I don't understand how long does it take to include these accessories into the bonded list. It should be able to be done overnight. And if the NBR takes that initiative, Now, instead of that, you are holding on to samples for 7 days, 10 days, because the accessory or the RFID tag. RFID tag has now become a standard item in all things all over the world. Now, if my custom officer in Dhaka Customs Airport does not understand that how important an RFID tag is, and that an RFID tag is not listed in the bond, so I won't release it. This is something which is, so that is what I'm saying. That's what the mindset change should be. Yes, if you go by the rules and if you go by the the custom officer in Dhaka Airport is doing absolutely the right thing. RFID is not in the bond list, so he's stopping it. Fine. But why can't we get the RFID in the list? Why should that take so long to do? That's the kind of issues which I think we need to address. So I think we need to have another, where we have more field level officers there, and also on why other areas. You see, the thing is, you need to talk to sector wise. In fact, having a webinar with too many sectors, rather than that, why don't we do some specific webinars? Why don't we talk to the bicycle guys and see what their problems are? Talk to the furniture guys, see what their problems are. That's the kind of thing I think we now need to do, because like I said, I'm convinced that the senior officials in the of the bureaucracy, wherever they may be, whether it is NBR or whether it is Finance Ministry or whether it is Ministry of Commerce, all the senior bureaucrats are convinced that we need to diversify our exports. You don't need to convince them of that. The question is, where are the bottlenecks? We have to identify the bottlenecks and solve those. I think that's that's how we should proceed.
Thank you, sir. You're spot on. You've given us the guidance that is needed, and mindset change, smooth, seamless trade, import, export, and trade is going to be the driver of growth in the future. We take this guidance from you, and I think hopefully we'll plan, specific sector-wise issues. And I think it's very important to mention that at the senior level of the bureaucracy, reform has set in, but we need to, it should be permeated down to the ground level, at the micro level. Thank you so much for this guidance. And I thank all the distinguished participants who've taken the time and the trouble to join us, and all the audience who were also, logged in the virtual, program. So thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for your understanding and for your patience. Thank you. Thank you. And
thank you for your moderation as well. Thank you very much.
There's lunch boxes.
We have logistics committee.